great pleasure to welcome you to this third webinar from the series Growth and Resilience in European Boards. This is part of a bigger project that I'm going to introduce in a few minutes. For the session today, we will be looking into how can we make disclosure a strategic tool? How can we go further from disclosure and transparency in a strategic context. Thank you so much for the amazing speakers that we have with us today. Thank you, Jaap Winter, Gaudiana Giusti, Maria Spielacchi, and Stephanie Flora Capdeville. We will also introduce them shortly. Myself, I'm Fernanda Tor. I'm the Operations Director here at Boards Impact Forum, and we also have with us Liselotte Engstam, that is the chair here at Boards Impact Forum also. Before we get started, let me give you a little bit of agenda to what's going to happen today. We have this little framing here before we start the the project, the initiative, and today we will have a keynote from Jaap Winter. Really looking forward to that. We go into panel and we start unpacking all these insights and we discuss the different contexts, etc. And then we have a poll, and after that poll, we go into breakout rooms so that you have really the opportunity to discuss and internalize these insights. We come back together in a plenary session where we'll be sharing those insights. So we would like you to mute yourselves now on the first part of the webinar. But we really encourage you to go into the chat, um, use the chat to share insights, questions, ideas, and references. I think it's really very giving when the chat also has a good dynamic. And just to make sure that you know your way to the chat, um, go to chat. Tell us where you are calling from, where you are sitting. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the specific challenge from today. Tell us what's the temperature where you are. We are under a heat wave in Europe. Let's see who is the unfortunate that wins on the temperature. We are recording the webinar. We will not share the discussion part and the breakout rooms, but we will share the recording with an insight piece around the main aspects that were discussed today. If you have any technical difficulties, please reach out. Now, like I said, I wanted to give you a little bit of context to this project. So this is the European Board's Growth and Resilience Roadmap, and it fundamentally starts from the idea that if Europe's competitiveness is to a great extent determined on how well boards govern this intersection of risk, opportunity across climate and sustainability, but also geopolitics and technological transformation, then we really want to make sure that we can translate um, into practical board action the principles from the World Economic Forum for climate and nature governance, which are the principles that are the guiding principles here at the Chapter Zero Alliance. So it's really about we have these principles, how we believe things should be done, but there's also a context of the world that we live in. So the roadmap is there in the middle. And give you a bit of context, what we are doing at the moment is this series of webinar to start really getting a bit of an understanding for these topics. We are working on a survey that we will share with everyone that has signed up for the webinars, but also broader to board directors in Europe. Um, We are going to have a forum in Amsterdam, 7th of October. Please pencil in the date, where we are going to have more of a working sessions, workshops around these topics. And finally, we present this roadmap and we get feedback and we keep working with it. For today's session, we will really be focusing on disclosure and transparency. So this is one of the four principles that we are addressing, and we will be addressing now on the next webinar, oversight and responsibility. The board should promote transparency, integrity, and accountability through the disclosures and fairly inform investors, stakeholders, and stakeholders in the broader sense also. And the board also oversees a system that enables true and fair reporting of how changes in climate and nature affect the financial performance and long-term prospects, long-term value creation of the firm. So this is the principle that we are focusing today, and I would like to pass to Liselott Engstam to introduce our first speaker of this webinar.
Thank you so much and warm welcome, everybody. It's my joy and delight to have the opportunity to introduce Jaap Winter to you. Jaap is one of our professors at this call, and he is one of the foremost authorities on corporate governance. He's had a combined distinguished academic career and practical career. So he's a partner at Phyleon Leadership and Governance. He's a professor at INSEAD and at Universiteit in Amsterdam. And he's also a professor of international company law at University of Amsterdam. He's also very engaged himself, serving as a chairman both on law topics in different law committees, but he's also practically a chair and a board member in public companies, which including the Royal Schiphol Group, and which gives him a fantastic opportunity to balance the academic insights with the practical insights. Warm welcome, Jaap, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Liselott. And after such an introduction, I'm always very curious what I'm going to say. Fernanda, could you put up the slides and then move to the first slide? And by the way, I'm in Amsterdam. It is fresh and sunny. It's only 14 degrees this morning. It's lovely weather actually outside. What I wanted to do is to look a little bit to financial disclosure, what we've learned from financial reporting, and then see what does it actually say in our ESG reporting, what can we learn from that, and then move on to the board strategic challenge. Now, reporting certainly the financial reporting area, but I think also the ESG reporting area is backward looking. What has occurred? What has happened? What have we done? And how do we account for it? So it's looking at the past. And more it's compliance driven. It's a technical expertise driven by previous loopholes, rules that have been escaped in previous situations to present a better picture, a nicer picture for investors than was actually justified very often. So it's become very detailed and dense, sort of Mandarin for experts. It's not just Mandarin that we could actually learn, but experts need to involve themselves to understand precisely how you need to report and what you need to report. It's all about accountability. In that sense, it's backward. What has happened in the past, and have you done what you should have been doing, or did you do something else? And how did you disclose that? How did you account for that? I think a very interesting angle and complexing angle in financial reporting is that it very, very often and typically is the basis for remuneration of executives, at least in listed companies. So whether targets have been met or not are derived from the data that have been reported, which creates a wonderful opportunity to manipulate those reported numbers again in order to boost your remuneration. And we've seen that from the start of the variable remuneration process in the past, in the early 1990s and onwards. And I think it's still the game that is played to some extent. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at what investors actually need in terms of financial information, they are much more interested in forward-looking information, in what to expect of the company in order to make investment decisions than what has occurred. They look at expected revenue growth. How's the cost development going for the company? What are the earnings forecasts? They want to understand whether the progress of the company or the lack of progress of the company continues in order to base their investment decision. And what then you see is that they seek assurance by talking to management in investor calls, in capital markets days, to understand how from the published disclosed numbers, management derives into expectations about the future. And that's precisely also what boards need when they think strategically, where do we need to be? The disclosed numbers, the disclosed reported numbers are a basis or a sort of reference point of where you are, but they don't tell you where to go to. You need to figure out strategically and come up with numbers, ideas, ambitions for your strategic and business outlook. Those strategic data are not disclosed data. They are undisclosed, and the reported data is just what is. And the challenge always there is, at least for listed companies, at what stage becomes strategic data, forward-looking data, price-sensitive information? In the sense that once some investors have these data, they have a sort of jump start in the market because they have a reason to expect certain movements in the share price based on these strategic data that others do not have or may not have yet. And the biggest challenge for listed companies then typically is what can you convey to your investors to give them trust or potential positive prospects without actually saying it, because if you say it, you have to say it to the whole market. And then you have to publish and publish forward-looking information of which you're typically much less sure than the reported data going back to the past. So that's a very sensitive area, the price sensitivity about forward-looking financial data. Next slide, please, Fernando. Now, ESG reporting based on the CSRD is in the same way, it's compliance driven, it's backward looking. Where have we been over the past year? What have we achieved? What are our various numbers? And if I bring it to my own company, the company of the board that I chair, Royal Schiphol Group, very detailed, now 76 pages of detailed reporting information. It was even more in 2024, over the book year 2024. And there was the first year that we had to report under the CSRD. And there was very little strategic ambition in these data. It was just reflecting what we thought we had to report. Very technical. And we actually, and that was surprising to me in a way, in our board, we had very little real discussion about these data. We just challenged ourselves, is this more or less correct or not? And we asked the auditor, what can you confirm and where there are difficulties in the way that we report? But it triggered very little in strategic sustainability discussion in the board at that moment. We were just engrossed in the technicalities of first time having to do this without having any strategic notion of it. Now in 2025, we have made changes to this ESG reporting. We have reduced the number of material risks and opportunities. We had way too much originally because we thought of so many things that could materially be relevant. The auditor at that stage already said, maybe it's a bit much. You can do less. You don't have to do all of this. And we did less. We focused more on core categories that matter to us most. So we started to learn what to report. And I think genuinely on the ESG reporting, we are still in that process, not just at us at Royal Schiphol Group, but companies generally. We're in the process of what to report and how to report and to learn how to do this. We have spent quite some time in having a more in-depth analysis of our double materiality. What is the financial impact of ESG factors on us ourselves, the financial impact on us ourselves? And next to the whole reporting, we've set up a new strategy last year for the group, and two core pillars of that strategy deal with the hardcore of ESG, I would say. First pillar is environment and society, and there's a lot of environment and society involved in running an airport, like the noise burdens, nitrogen emissions, CO2, biodiversity, water, circular production. But also the second pillar are employees, safe and healthy working conditions, quality of work. Not so much yet the way that AI is affecting whether there is work or not, because we're a very logistic infrastructural company, and AI has not yet that impact on those processes. Those physical processes are still very much there. What I expect to happen on ESG reporting is that we're going to have, over the next years, and it may take 10, 15 years before we get this right, a lot of challenges to enforced corrections of our ESG reporting, like we've seen in financial reporting. We're probably going to make mistakes, overstate certain effects that are challenged by others. And if we make the analogy to financial reporting, regulators will probably step in and correct us and force us to correct our numbers because this was overstated or understated. We need to learn how to do this as a community. And that will end up with more detailed rules, more compliance driven. Therefore, reporting becomes more compliance driven rather than strategic. There's one element in the CSRD which I think is very interesting, and it requires us to report on any climate transition plan if we have any. Now, the CSDDD originally forced companies to have a climate transition plan. So to state your transition plan and to measure our progress in light of that plan. Now, the CSDDD, as we all know, has been toned down quite a bit by the omnibus legislation. So the climate transition plan requirement has disappeared. It's no longer a requirement to have it, but the CSRD still says if you have it, you must report on it. And that's interesting feature in the reporting bit. That's forward-looking, which comes with much more uncertainty and doubt perhaps about whether you're right or not. But that's an interesting feature. That's a much more strategic level of information than anything else in the ESG reporting bit. So let's see how that starts to develop, how companies are actually doing this. Next slide, please. In order to have forward-looking ESG information, as I said, the reported numbers didn't tell us much about what actually our ambitions were and whether we were happy with these numbers or not. We started to develop a dashboard of achievements versus our stated targets. What have we said we wanted to achieve, say, by 2030? And what is the progress that we've made this year in light of those targets? And we needed those dashboards in the board to figure out, are we on track? Or are we doing a lot but not knowing where we end up in? So this is a core tool for us to allow us to monitor our progress in light of our targets. And it's quite a challenge for the company to make it, actually, to build it and to build it robust. We use the reporting numbers as input for that strategic monitoring process. And then it becomes strategic. The data then becomes strategic rather than just as reported, disclosed, this is where we were last year. So we start to use that as a basis for our dialogue and decision making in the board. And to be frank, I think we're very much at the start of that process, thinking about, are these actually the right targets? Are we making the right sort of progress? And if we're not making that sort of progress, what needs to change in order to speed up? I've always said as chair of the board, I think particularly in aviation, we need to speed up much faster than we're comfortable with. But are we or not? So that's how we use that information from the reporting side to build a strategic tool, a dashboard tool that helps us monitor progress. What an interesting next step could be, looking to the financial reporting area. Can we imagine that companies at some stage would hold stakeholder days, not just capital market days for your investors, but stakeholders more generally, to inform them about your strategic ESG ambitions and whether you make progress and what sort of progress you're actually happy with or not at all? That would be interesting. see where the companies open up to different groups of stakeholders in order to share their ESG ambitions, their progress or lack of progress, and be open for discussion with this. Is disclosure itself becoming more strategic? The formal regulatory reporting part in itself is not strategic, I think. It's very much compliance driven, and boards need to filter out the information from that basis of data in order to generate strategic data that you can work with as a board and base your strategic decisions on in order to make it forward looking. Next slide, Fernanda. And 2 points I would love to make to close off, and they are actually not directly related to disclosure, but certainly the strategic board thinking that is required. In order to become truly forward-looking, you have to have long-term ambition and progress. And if we look then at aviation, the company that I chair, Schiphol, as an airport, a positive CO2 emission result will only be reached far in the future. Net zero is not around the corner for aviation. It may be 2050. Some actually predict this will never happen before 2070. Realistically, depending on technological progress. The CO2 emissions of aviation are coming down per flight. So any particular aircraft that is produced now is producing less CO2 emissions than previous generations. So innovation helps, but the aviation volume growth outpaces the CO2 reduction. We're flying much more, so as a net result, aviation generates more CO2 emissions, and that will not stop. Innovation needs to move much faster in order to start to outpace the volume growth. But the sector is hard to abate because of this long investment cycles. It takes 30, 40 years before you get rid of old planes to make it sensibly for an investment perspective. And what you see in the aviation sector broadly, that has the effect of putting things off. Because we know the effects are only there fully in 30, 50 years' time, many people feel, okay, I don't have to do anything today. And that's the huge, anybody in aviation working, any board of any company in the aviation sector is running and have to deal with. The tendency to not think about what you should be doing, because the effects will only be there in 30, 50 years, depending on a lot of innovation which simply does not yet exist. I think what helps for boards in order to get going is to think of transition as a path, not as an outcome that you need to achieve very quickly. It's impossible, but a path that you need to start walking today. Develop the pathway that works for aviation for your company, and make the first steps. Focus on those first steps rather than on the end result that you at some point need to achieve, because it's too far away to, in our mind, be able to hold it in our mind and still feel it as realistic. And what you then see, particularly in the Netherlands around aviation, and maybe in other countries as well, that activist pressure is typically focused on absolute results today. And anything which does not deliver an absolute result today is not good enough. The outside world pressures you to deliver results now, or some part of the outside world, making it very difficult to explain that you're on a slow and small pathway of small steps that leads you to progress in the end. How is that going to be sufficient today? I think that's a challenge to explain to the outside world for boards how to do this. How can you be comfortable with that slow and small progress while you know so much has to happen? And finally, that's not the last slide yet, but 2 slides. The other challenge, if you look at real forward-looking progress in the ESG area, and again, for my company, in particular in CO2 emissions, that is scope 3. And for many companies, I think scope 3 is the hard part. Scope 1 and 2, we know what to do. We can handle, it's costly, we need to be effective. But scope 3, you're not alone. You need others. And for Schiphol, for example, our scope 3 CO2 emissions is 95% of jet fuel burning by aircraft, which are not ours. They're owned by airlines. For them, this is scope 1. For an airport, it's scope 3. Now, you can imagine technological change, electric flight for short range, hydrogen for mid-range, and sustainable aviation fuel for long range, but it takes a lot of time to make that really happen. And no single party can do this on its own. That's, I think, a real challenge here. We need airlines, aircraft producers, motor producers, energy providers, airports, air traffic control agencies, governments from the regulatory side, all to work in sync to make sense of a pathway that starts to work over time. And that is hugely complex to move that whole ecosystem. How to transform an ecosystem where airlines are under constant financial pressure. They make very little profits, so their investment space is limited. Energy providers, as we know today, focus on simply burning fossil fuel. They're moving away from renewable energies back to fossil fuels as much as we can. The regulatory environment in Europe, at least on aviation, is focused on growth, not on scarcity. All these elements factor into a challenge that make it hard to change the ecosystem. And then the last slide, Fernando. And I think this is crucial for us as boards. This requires very new, changed, different leadership. Long-term sustainable progress is something very different than immediate financial result. An ecosystem change is something very different than having your own company excel in the current ecosystem. You need different leaders. And this is where we come in as boards. We are the persons who select the new leadership. And new leadership focused on long-term and ecosystem change is something very different than many of the leaders we've had in the past that we have appointed in the past. I think that's become our strategic ambition and challenge for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think the interesting thing with the ecosystem is that beyond the environmental path, that is exactly also where we see a lot of new needed capabilities on boards also when it comes to AI. We really need to have a guidance and a supervision much closer on things outside of our company. Thank you so much for sharing that and for your generous openness. Now we have the joy to bring in the fantastic panel. And the interesting thing with this panel is, besides actually coming from very different jurisdictions, they are also all of them actually linked to the investor side. So they are on boards which actually decides on board members, which might be closer to regulation, some of them. So if I start with Gordana Giusti, she's an independent board director with deep expertise in corporate governance and capital markets. She serves as an independent director at A2A and GEOX, and she's on the steering committee of Chapter 0 Italy. Warm welcome, Gordana. Then we have Maria Psiliaki, who's our second professor for this call. And she is also across corporate governance, financial markets, and ESG. And she serves on the advisory committee to the Capital Market Commission in Greece. And she's on the board of directors of the Hellenic Investors Association. Warm welcome, Maria. And then we have Stephanie Flora Capdeville. And she's also an independent board director with a specific focus on climate expertise. She serves as a non-executive director on the Green for Growth Fund, and she sits on committees at the Fonds Français pour l'Environnement Mondial and the UN Global Diversity Framework. So we have a dense competence here with a mix of actually both sitting on boards linked to investors. So I wanted to start with Gordana. From your experience on boards and risk committees, how do you ensure that the sustainability disclosures are genuinely connected to strategy and not just a parallel reporting exercise, as many of us actually have had it that has already now reported for the last 3 years? I would be really interested to hear your perspectives on this, Gordana.
Thank you, Liselott, for the questions. That's very crucial point because to me it cuts the difference in between sustainability that is reported and sustainability which really actually drives the company. My starting point is pretty straightforward. I view things slightly differently from Jaap. We do not have a complete regulatory gap here. If we look at the CSRD, despite the transition plan after Omnibus is no longer mandatory, there is a mandatory disclosure in a number of forward-looking things, which are strategy, business model, value chain. So I think still CSRD is requiring companies to provide a number of information on sustainability strategy. The most important question for me is not if sustainability strategy appears in the reporting, because it does. The big important question if this is the same strategy that actually drives industrial plan, capital allocation, and executive incentives. We're going to touch briefly this point later because it's most crucial. Or unfortunately, as I'm talking by experience, so I'm pretty honest and transparent on this, or whether this is a parallel narrative produced for the purpose of the sustainability disclosure, somewhat disconnected from the operational reality. Now, the test is simple. One has to see if the sustainability KPIs lives inside the industrial plan, the capital allocation, the risk appetite, and the executive sense, or they don't. And in this sense, I think most open they don't. So I am taking the liberty of providing a few recommendations for all people sitting in the boards as I do. So the first thing, important thing, is sequencing. Materiality should fit the strategic plan. Strategic plan should fit the risk appetite. The risk appetite should fit remuneration, where this sequence breaks. You get a comp not actually internalized. The second most important thing, and I know Liselott, you care about this, is the dialogue in between the risk committee and the board. I've been chairing a number of committees and assessing the technicality of the risk map that the company is addressing. But the most
Okay, I think we're losing.
important thing is that this exercise is not the... Pardon? You're not here? You can't hear me?
I think you're breaking up a bit. So if you can just say a last sentence, I think we'll move on and see if it stabilizes.
Okay. Now are you getting me?
Yeah.
I took off the earpads.
I think
Is
that's
that okay
better.
now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So the important is that the board, taking into account of the exercise which is done by the risk committee, is prepared to reshape the plan and consider which risk require capital allocation to be addressed in the plan, because otherwise risk get filed and not addressed. The third most important thing, I have a couple and then I leave the floor to who else is going to speak after me, is the team working on sustainability reporting. You cannot have a team, and in the past, you have seen so many times that it was the communication team to work on the sustainability reporting, which of course it's a different language, it's a different kind of skills and responsibility. The team working the sustainability reporting should be the same team working on the broader strategy company.
Yeah.
And last but not least, the double materiality, which is at the basis, the double materiality analysis, which is at the basis of any sustainability reporting should not get to the board, as most often happens, unfortunately, as already compiled, already done. The board should have a say, because this is the fundamental of the subsequent reporting exercise.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you so much, Godana. I totally agree with you. I think it's so many times happens that we're presented with a done deal on the double materiality, with the argument that they have interviewed all of us, but we've never debated it. And that is what needs happening in order for us to actually have it implemented also into the business strategy. Thank you so much for sharing that. I thought I'd go to Stephanie. So as someone that sits here on the intersection of kind of climate finance and the board governance, what do you look for in companies' disclosures when you assess the long-term resilience and investment quality? What is it that you are looking for? So we know. And we need you to, yeah,
yes.
Thank you.
To unmute. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much to Jaap for the very inspiring presentation. And also, I'm happy to be in this event. It reminds me of old times before COVID, when we used to have breakfast, business breakfast before joining the office. So it's quite nice to be so early all together. And so what I would like to bring as a contribution is my long-term experience, because I started in climate finance 25 years ago, first as an operator in capital markets. And I would like to say that 25 years ago, when green finance, sustainability investment started, it all started with reporting. So sort of it's a pathway, as Jaap said, and it has to start with steps and milestones, and it starts with reporting as an exercise to see what is your baseline, what you have done, and then you build the future on that. So I've been in different positions, either investment in equity funds, and for instance, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index building, which is now led by, at that time, when it started, was led by Sun Sustainable Asset Management from Switzerland. And what we were looking for is for these reports, the sustainability reports, and how companies were establishing, not only providing the reports, but also establishing the teams and the internal systems to build these reports and to make them exactly what Gaudiana said, not only communication exercise, but a real insider exercise, and changing not only the management, but also how the teams internally in the companies relate among themselves. And now I'm more focusing on blended finance, investing directly in projects and companies, with a Green for Growth Fund, where I'm sitting at the board. And what we really look for is beyond compliance, disclosure, compliance, disclosure, and behind. What is behind? So those two keywords are important. Beyond compliance. So beyond the reports that have to be done, and especially in the fund industry, we have not only the influence of the CSRD, but we also have the sustainable finance disclosure regulation, the SFDR, which is very much anchored. And the good thing is that it's not questioned; it's now established, I would say, and very much assimilated by the whole financial industry. Even if it's changing, but it's changing in the sense of being more coherent with the omnibus. But the changes are not so challenging that compared to those in the CSRD. So when we look beyond the pure disclosure and the reports that are compulsory, it means that we look what companies do as members of collective actions? Do they report? I mean, are they joining the TCFD, TNFD now exercise? Global reporting initiative or any collective, specific to their sector. For instance, in the blended finance area, we work a lot with development banks, and there are development banks in all in all countries, national development banks. It's important to see if they join. For instance, there is a movement towards Paris alignment methodologies in this sector. So. Very important to see if the partners, if the investees, they join any kind, and it's very diverse. You have regional initiatives at level of, in Africa, in Asia, and all this is important. What we like to see also is beyond the disclosure exercise, what they do with the ecosystem, like Jaap said. So rebounding on that, in the financial sector, the ecosystem is moving towards green, because you have the different actors of the ecosystem, the regulators who have the chance that they are involved in the network for greening the financial system. The pension funds, they have their initiatives, insurance companies as well, etc. So the different layers of the ecosystem are moving their way, and they do different things. And it's important to interlink, because the motivation from one part of this ecosystem to move is because the whole ecosystem is moving, and not at the same pace, but it's moving. And I'm very proud to see that after so many years, the financial system is quite resilient to all these changes, and is keeping the faith and the long-term trend. I mean, I've seen meetings where central banks say, okay, the governments are changing, CSRD is softer, etc. But we won't change our trend.
Right.
They are long-term, and the governments in 2, 3, 5 years, they will change again. And so we have to be, it's maybe a new area where we have to go beyond compliance and have a longer term view than our regulators or governments are asking us to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Behind, I have to say a word on the behind. What is behind disclosure? So it's all, I refer to everything internal. Do we have do the investees have, and ourselves as companies, do we have the right teams, systems, environmental and social management system, use of standards, and all kind of licenses, labels, certifications, etc. And it's an opportunity to work more internally with not only with the executive teams, but also to have an eye on how things happen inside.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that. I do think that we are moving forward despite regulation, or thanks to regulation in Europe. I think one of the areas that I find has creeped in is the big challenge for all of us who works globally to have the same thing that's asked for in Europe is actually illegal in other parts of the world. And I think that really brings an interesting dimension for a lot of us that works on boards. And I wanted to ask Maria now. So your research spans both corporate finance and governance and ESG. What do you find that we are, what's the evidence that we're most falling short of in disclosures that you can see?
Okay, good morning to everybody. Thanks for the invitation. So here in Greece, the weather is very nice, close to the sea. Coming back to the question, academic evidence highlights two major weaknesses. First, as Jaap said, Scope 3 emissions are often inconsistent because companies frequently change measurement methods. Despite this, they are presented on equal footing with audited Scope 1 data as if they had the same reliability. Second, climate scenario analysis remain too descriptive. Many companies claim that they are resilient, without providing financial impact,
Right.
changes in investment assumptions, or impairment analysis.
Right.
Under CSRD, impact materiality is also often treated as a compliance exercise rather than a meaningful stakeholder dialogue. So, in order to, good practices requires transparency, consistent methodologies, quantified analysis, and board-level discussions that connect sustainability risks directly to strategy and financial performance.
Right. Thank you so much, Maria. And I think it's good to remind ourselves that there are areas where actually there's a dilemma and we need to take charge of it, exactly as you point out. I wanted to ask also Jaap. So you're overseeing a lot of disclosures and a lot of board work in general. So the key question is, have we really taken on a strategic view on KPIs and reporting, or are we kind of giving it to management and treating it still more as a compliance area? And in particular, you can comment on this challenge that we sit with on global companies where we have the US making both the E&S areas illegal to actually put on goals now, and how we should handle that.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. That's a big question.
It is.
It's a big
And
question.
we're already sitting with it, with all global companies.
It's an absolute fair question. To be frank, if I look from where we came from in 2015 Paris Agreement to where we are now, a lot has happened, and we have focused on the low-hanging fruit, which is scope 1 and 2, which is understandable. That's in our control, and I think many companies have taken that on as their own strategic ambition. We need to get this right, and some may be further ahead than others, but I think genuinely boards have taken on that challenge and sometimes also pushed management to do much more in that field. But the low-hanging fruit is where that's gone. Now the real challenge comes, and now it becomes much harder. What you see both in boards, both managerial and non-executive, is a shying away from the big challenge. Because the outcome is way too uncertain over the long term, and it forces, and you need so many others to play the similar game. And I think Stephanie's right. The financial industry may actually be moving further and faster as an ecosystem than any industrial space.
Yeah.
And I think this is where the hesitation comes in. You can't force it yourself. You need others. But how do you build ecosystems, coalitions of the willing that seek to do the same thing in sync with each other?
Right.
We need much more ambition in boards to do so. And it is only natural for management to shy away from this if your current performance is under pressure. That, of course, you start to focus on that. But this long-term directional thinking needs to happen, and we need to do it now, feeling uncomfortable with it and still do it. And I think I've said in many previous conversations and webinars at INSEAD as well, I think it requires something of us as board members. If we stay in our thinking at what Subir Angan at INSEAD calls the decision level, we're looking at the immediate consequences in the here and now, we're never going to make this. We actually need to go deeper a little bit and get to the level of what he calls choice, which is related to our identity, our strong held beliefs, and actually, for me personally, and I think for many others on board, what do you want your children to think of you about what you've done today in order to clean up the mess for them in the future? Is it that you're happy with, well, I did something and I know it's not enough, and I leave it to your generation to start doing it? Or do you want to really make a change and start to work on it, knowing that it's not going to be enough, but I want to fundamentally do this? For me, that has been the reason to join the board of Royal Schiphol Airport, in order to see whether we nonetheless can do something, however hard it is. But if we stay at this decision level, we typically will not find the courage to step over ourselves and the immediate consequences into a realm which is much more uncertain.
Yeah.
Requires much more determination of us to make that happen. And I think that's precisely what is needed, the hard work.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it goes back to, are we even actually spending enough time to revisit our purpose of our companies? And do we agree across the board? What is the future purpose of our company? And especially now, when we both have the climate, but we also have the AI actually questioning our entire business models for our companies. So I think that what we'll do now, I'll save the rest of the questions to after we've been in the breakout rooms. Fernanda, can we get the poll up?
I'm just here going to share my screen. And here, do you see the poll?
Yes, we do. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So there's 3 questions for you. The first one is kind of the ownership that we actually talked about just the last piece here. And then the strategic use, do we actually use it as a forward-looking tool? And the third one is on our visibility, the data integrity that we have. And of course, none of this, it's fully confidential, so nobody can see who has answered what. We just would like to have this as part of the background for us all to go into the discussions. And we can see that we're starting to get about half of the people have answered now. So we'd like for a couple of more to answer before we close the poll. And I think we'll close the poll in another 3 seconds. So if you just hurry up to answer, we will get your answer in. Okay, we will now close the poll and we will share the result. And then I thought I'd just ask each and every one of you to comment on one each. So Gordiana, the first one, our board actively oversees sustainability and non-financial disclosures. It's quite positive.
That's quite optimistic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite a positive feedback.
Right.
I mean, I was slightly, as mentioned before, more pessimistic, but I'm happy to see that the outcome here is 46 is pretty good.
Yes, yeah, I agree. And the question is, what does oversee mean to board directors here on the call? So let's go to number 2.
That's a big question, because overseas could be interpreted in a number of ways.
It could. The strategic use, so do we use it as a forward-looking tool? And maybe if, Stephanie, if you kind of want to comment on that one, it's a bit more diverse.
Yeah, well, what I see is that the majority is on partially agree, when on the first one it was more agree.
Yeah.
So we see that if we go more in depth, we lose ground a little bit, even if it's still quite, positive that we see that boards are working on it.
Right.
But as far as they have to go deeper, they see they have to do more progress. And
Right.
myself, I'm maybe the only one that strongly agrees, because I work on and sitting on an exceptionally green financial instrument where things are
Parce que j'ai oublié
world.
d'aller
And
d'éteindre.
that's it.
Merde.
Happy to
Okay,
see
I think we
result.
need to ask all people that's not speaking to go on mute. So the last one, which would be on the data integrity, that we actually have the insight. Maria, what's your comment on the response there?
Yes, I think I agree, because most of people agree on that. So we have, I think, to integrate financial alongside with financial KPIs, and so to engage strategic decision with major investments together. So I think most of our people that they are here, they for our members agree with that, because if you add the answers, most of people agree on that. So I think this is some essential things that can be done, and also from the audit committee, because the disclosures is from the side of the audit committee, so it's not the audit committee. The audit committee.
Okay, I think we're losing you a bit in terms of coverage.
The audit committee has a new role now.
Yeah,
it's not only to review finance.
I think we'll close up
controls
there.
And audit reports. It has to oversee enterprise risk, climate disclosure.
Right. I think we're losing you a bit, Maria. So let's move on. A quick last comment from Stephanie.
Yes, on that one, I want to share best practice. In our board, we use, in fact, periodically every 2 years, we hire a new board member, because we renew the board. We have 5, and we have to turn around every 4 or 8 years, and we use the onboarding sessions of the new that are aiming at the new boards, but to invite also the experienced board members to attend as well, and we use it to have.
Okay. I think we lost Stephanie as well. So let's move on.
Yes,
a couple of hours
problem,
presentation of the whole cooking off.
Right.
And yeah, so practically, this is how we do it in our board.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And let's go to the next step here. Now we're going to ask you to be in breakout rooms. Also, our presenters here will be part of that. We ask you to agree a chair to lead and a vice chair to take the notes or make the feedback when we come back. Except for our panelists and speakers here, they can't be any of these roles, but they will be there to discuss. And we want you to discuss, where is your board today on disclosure? And what is one concrete change you could prioritize to move from compliance to be much more a strategic tool? And you've heard some examples here. And you will be around 4 or 5 in each room. So we will now open the rooms, and you will have 15 minutes to discuss.
Quickly, I just really want you all to save the date for the 16th of June. A similar breakfast experience like today, starting at 8 in the morning. We will have Ludo van der Leyen, INSEAD professor in corporate governance, emeritus professor. And we also have Julie Badley, a guiding star for us in the Chapter Zero Alliance, Virginie Morgan from France, and Marina Niforos from Greece, on the webinar, where we are really looking into the board themselves then, in terms of accountability, but also the foundations from the principles. Please register. Let's keep the discussion on the 16th of June, and pencil down the date, 7th of October, for this kind of more hands-on working session in Amsterdam. We will come back with more information. We're going to share with all the participants, but please save the date on the 7th of October. And thank you so much to all our amazing speakers. Thank you so much for the kindness in sharing your amazing knowledge, and to all the participants and engaging in the breakout room discussions also. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Fernanda. And for those who need